welcome to Northpointe Plus, episode 85. Here with Jay Coward, and I'm Amber Redman. This is my first time hosting, so we're going to see how I do.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. You've got the powerful microphone. It's going to go however you want it to go. You're in charge, Amber. That's what that means.
That gave me anxiety. Thank you. So Jake, you preached yesterday, Eyes on Eternity.
Mm-hmm.
First Thessalonians chapter 2.
That's right.
Okay, cool. And can you give us an overview?
Yeah. So we jumped in in our Thessalonians series here, Eye on the Future. So we're kind of looking overarching of this idea of keeping an eye on the prize of Jesus' return, things like that. We haven't gotten into the meat of that yet because we're still in the first couple chapters of First Thessalonians. So it's a lot of introductory stuff. Mm-hmm. Rick laid a lot of groundworks for that last week. And then this week, Paul was just kind of talking to the church in Thessalonica, having them kind of remember the times that he was with them as he established the church. And so he's both doing that to establish credibility, which we didn't dive a ton into. There's a lot there, but people didn't want to hear me speak for 3 hours. So we just chose what we were going to talk about. And that was really that in a lot of ways, Paul was setting up a model for relational evangelism was the term that I use most of the time. You'll hear us call that disciple-making friendships. Yeah. And it's just that idea of how important it is to have a relationship with people, connect with them, and then use that to further the gospel in a lot of ways and to encourage, to stand alongside, to get to know people. It's spreading the love of Jesus, the good news of Jesus, by establishing relationships first. So it is kind of the exact opposite of standing outside of Spartan Stadium or Lugnut Stadium with the turn or burn sign, right? There's no relationship in that. This is the exact opposite. This is coming, standing beside, getting to know somebody. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we have those connections already, which is a cool thing. So, yeah.
You used the example of one of your professors.
Shane Train, toot toot. Yeah, I thought about sending him that clip, like cutting it out and sending it to him, because we keep in contact every once in a while, not like all the time, because he's a professor and he's got lots of people in his life. But yeah, Shane Train, we talked a little bit because he was my mentor in college, Dr. Garrison. And funny thing is, when he was in college, he was actually in college with my siblings. All my siblings are a decade or more older than me. So when I got there and I was like, yeah, I met this guy, Dr. Garrison, and they all knew him. And I was like, what in the world? So funny. So like they all had that connection and stuff. And he mentored me, talked to me for over a year just about life and really showed me what relational evangelism or disciple-making friendships was like and what the value of asking good questions and listening were. So I'm forever grateful for him, for sure.
That's super cool. There's one thing you said that I wanted to point to because you said, hold on, I have to find it. You said he listened, asked questions, and pointed towards Jesus, and he taught me more than just ministry. He taught me about myself.
Yeah.
Which totally is awesome because that's like what we experience in life group, like my husband and I. So that definitely resonated.
Yeah.
Which I think brings us into the first question.
Yeah.
How do I find a person and make a connection to be able to have a disciple-making relationship?
Yeah, this was anonymously submitted, right? We didn't have a name on this one, but it's a good question, right? I mean, I think we talked about how important it is to have disciple-making friendships, to have people that you're connecting with. Well, how do you do that? How do you have those connections? I think the default is to start with relationships that you already have, whether it's in family, whether it's friends, whether it's coworkers. Like, man, Jesus is moving in their life too. Mm-hmm. He's doing some really cool things, and a lot of times we're not aware of it. Yeah, because we're just busy. We're just living life. I got 2 kids and one on the way, so we're just surviving right now between Shopkins and lack of sleep and Miss Rachel and Bluey videos. We're just surviving at times, so you don't always see those connections. But I think it just starts with recognizing you've already got really good relationships in your life, so leverage those, have those, become a better friend by listening more, become a better a relative by listening more. I know everyone's had like flashbacks of horrors of Thanksgiving in their head in that moment, but that's okay. You'll survive. But it's just having those connections and then recognizing when those Jesus moments occur, when someone's talking about something and the Spirit moves and it just says, hey, you need to share your story with them, or hey, you know that Bible verse that you were doing in your study, like that applies a little bit here, or hey, what about these questions? And the reality is it's not culminating for a moment. Like I said with Dr. Garrison, I don't remember a moment with him. I don't remember something he said that like, I'm going to get tattooed on my forearm so I see it forever. Like none of that happened. We just talked, and he had great advice all the time. But he let me talk more. And he just bought coffee and asked good questions, and we chatted and we developed trust. So there are those relationships that we have naturally. And I would also say, if you feel like, hey, I don't have that connection right now, pray about it.
Oh yeah.
Stop and pray and just say, hey, God, I want to be obedient. I want to have these relationships because not only do I want to pour you out to other people, but I also recognize the value in having that poured into me. Yeah. So how do I do that? What are those connections? Can you kind of reveal those? Can you bring those forward for me as well? Because that would be incredibly helpful. And it's also why we are incredibly intentional as a church. We believe people go further, faster spiritually in relationships with other people. It's why we're a groups-based church. And so we have connect groups, we have life groups, we have care groups, we've got intentional ministry for women, intentional ministry for men. And in all of those, we're just trying to create arenas for people to be around other people, to have these disciple-making friendships take root. And sometimes they take root really quickly, and sometimes they take a little bit of time. Yeah. And that's okay. Sometimes we want an answer right now. We live in a microwave culture. It's crockpot. Let's just be honest right now. We're going to crockpot everything when it comes to your spiritual life for the most part. It just takes time. But we create those avenues. So maybe you're not a part of life groups or a group or something like that. Test it out. Try it out. Get to know people. Go to the upcoming women's study that's coming on. We got men's studies that are coming down, life groups that are going all the time, an apologetics group that's going. It's just a great way to meet people, begin to develop those relationships, and disciple-making friendships are going to formulate out of those.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree fully. I wanted to say, too, you said that your mentor had great advice, which is always a good thing. But sometimes, like when you're creating those relationships, it's not about giving advice. Yeah. It's about those things happen. But like you said, we're starting the intentional ministry to women, and the groups that are starting this week, one of the things that I have been saying to our group leaders is advice has its time and its place, but a lot of times what people need is not advice. Yeah. They need to know that they're being heard and seen. And so I guess I probably need to hear that more often.
Yeah, it's timing, right? The reason he had great advice is because he didn't have a lot of it in a lot of ways, because I got to do most of the talking about what was going on, and he just listened and was smart enough to filter through all of that to what the core of the things were. Ask me great questions about that. And then because we had coffee every week for over a year, he got to speak into my life. Right. I was still coming. If he'd have said week 1, hey, here's a list of how to fix everything, and just handed that to me, we probably wouldn't have had a week 2 of getting coffee. But he didn't. He just listened. And I think that's a big piece of it for people, is just listening of what's going on in their life to really get an understanding, because there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to most problems in life. So understanding everything that's involved with it, and then being able to speak into it when you get that permission to do so, and that relationship's established, the trust is established, those kinds of things. But once again, it's not microwave, it's crockpot. Yeah, it's crockpot. Right. It's a friendship. It's a relationship. It's supposed to take time. It's supposed to be long.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really good too. I know that for us, Life Group has been just a pivotal, spiritually shaping event. Yeah. We've been in our life group for probably 5 years. And the thing that's interesting, so Rick and Deb are our life group leaders. And
well, that's just cheating. That's why it's been so pivotal and all this other stuff. That's cheating.
Probably it is. I always say, like, he is our pastor, but he's also our friend. So that's not why we're there. But the thing that's interesting that Rick said to me recently was, like, how different Jake and I are in taking things in. And so he's like, when I get intentional with Jake, I go do stuff with him. When I get intentional with you, we sit down like this.
Oh yeah, that's gender. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I am going to say it. It's gender. Like, women want to get together and they want to sit across and have a conversation. Guys, it's so surface level. If we do that, we'll talk sports, we'll talk weather, we'll make a few jokes, crack stuff, wisecracks here, this or that. But if you get us doing a task together and we're standing shoulder to shoulder, side by side, working on something, oh man, you're more likely to get stuff that's going on. I'm going to go hang out with friends and we're going to watch the draft on Thursday night because we like sports and are bored apparently or just want to get out of the house. And so we're going to watch guys have their name called and walk across the stage. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I imagine life stuff will come up.
Yeah.
But we're also all going to be looking at the screen and next to each other because men communicate best when we're not looking at each other's faces, and women connect best when they are eye to eye. It's just a funny thing of how we're made, I think. But
it is a funny
or how our culture has done it or whatever it is. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's good though to know, like when you're creating those relationships, like paying attention to what it is that is the person needs, Anyway.
Yeah.
So we also had another question from Dan Ermaltu. Did I say that right?
Dan Ermitlu. Dan, the apologetics man. Come on, Dan.
So it says in Acts 17, 1-4, Paul is in Thessalonica, and it speaks specifically about his method of outreach. It says he reasoned with and persuaded some of the Jews and a great many Greeks in the city. Not to underestimate the relational factor here, but it also seems like Paul used an apologetic approach with the Thessalonians. Thoughts?
I love this. I feel like I'm jumping into a battle royale with Dan right now where he's like, no, apologetics are the answer. And I'm saying, no, Dan, relationship is the answer. What are you talking about, right? And I love Dan. Dan's a good friend of mine. He's a personal friend. And he has a great heart. He leads our apologetics group on Fridays right now. And if you have questions and you just want to really get into the nitty gritty of apologetics and the study of kind of persuasion and reason of hey, does it really make sense for us to believe these things? How in the world could we still have a world after a flood? If was there an actual flood and answer those kinds of questions? Dan is really good at digging into that kind of stuff. And he's got a whole community there with him that they do fun stuff. Got a great heart behind it too. That's the best part about it. Because you can get argumentative in apologetics. Dan doesn't do that. And that group doesn't do that. That class doesn't do that. They do that group together because they're just looking for good answers and good conversations rooted in love. So it's a really cool thing. I would highly recommend that apologetics group that we've got going on as well. But so basically Paul is really cool here. Paul uses both knowledge here and he uses persuasion as we read, as Dan said, Acts chapter 17, Paul goes to the temple here 3 weeks in a row, and he's reasoning, he's persuading, he's having conversations to point out that, hey, Jesus is the Messiah and this is how it was filled. And because he does that, it tells us people's eyes were open and they became followers of Jesus. And then we get to his letter in 1 Thessalonians and he talks about wanting to share life together and not be a burden and going through hardships and being side by side, and that people were enthralled by that and came to love Jesus. And so it's okay, well, what is it? Do you have to have all of the knowledge?
Right.
And you have to have the answer and the argument and be persuasive? Or is the real knowledge really not as important? You don't have to have the degree, but you just have to have the relationship and be connecting with people. The answer is yes. Yes, right? We want to think these are two diametrically opposed things, and they're just not. Yeah. They work really well together. It makes so much sense for Paul to walk into, as a missionary who is Jewish, to walk into the synagogue and go, hey guys, have you thought about this? Jesus guy, look at this. He's fulfilled all of our Old Testament stuff. In fact, he's God. And have this conversation in a public forum where people are listening and it's all about debate and going back and forth. It makes total sense in that time period and in that setting for Paul to do that. Yeah. He didn't do that every day or all day. He would have gone and eaten dinner with people. He would have been working side by side, making tents because he didn't want to be a burden. So he's got his business going on here too, his little side hustle to do ministry over there. He's bivocational Paul, and he's making tents, working side by side, having conversations with people about it as well. And he's getting to know them. He's knowing their name. He's knowing about their kids. He's knowing their hobbies. He's knowing what they like and dislike and their favorite whatever sports, their chariot racing team or whatever might have been down there, right? And he's getting to know people and he's making relational connections and he's having Jesus moments that he's sharing with them too. And that's why Paul is just this really cool embodiment because he's got both of them down. Paul didn't go only relationship and he didn't go only knowledge in this, but he was prepared to do both. And I think that's a great thing for us. So it would be unwise for us as Christ followers. And Scripture talks about this of being only on milk and never going to the meat, of just kind of always never just diving into Scripture to get the answers, and it can be scary to do. I've had multiple conversations with people that like they're beginning to think about stuff. Maybe it's through eternity or it's just hardships in the Bible, and they begin to think, and they're like, I don't want to question it too much because if I do that, I'm going to have a crisis of faith. In which I tell them all the time, go have a crisis of faith.
Yeah.
Like, go question that, go research it, have tears, like cry about it because it's painful and hard and hurts you, and then come out the other end and you'll realize you love Jesus even more. Because if it's true, it's so good, and there's incredibly good, logical, reasonable answers to believe what we believe. It's not some crazy Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling writing that's fun, but not real. It's genuine. There you can research and find these things out, and the Bible proves itself again and again and again. It's not illogical to believe in this, and the more you dive into that, the more God's going to reveal Himself, and it's going to be fantastic. On the flip side of that, if you have all of the Bible knowledge in the world, but you're not willing to love people and meet them where they're at, you got to exercise those spiritual muscles.
Right.
If you can eat all of the Scripture and all the Bible knowledge and have all that, but you never exercise those spiritual muscles, man, you're just a fat Christian sitting on the couch with all that you got in there. Right. You got to exercise and get out and run and use it and share it with other people. So it really is both. And that's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And if we were doing a passage and we were talking through Acts 17 and 1 Thessalonians 2, we'd have pointed that out. We only chose 1 Thessalonians 2. Dan, I want you to do Acts 17, man. I'm leaving it out there for you. We do a study on Acts 17. We'll talk about that important piece of it, which also does remind me, I'm going to pop in real quick. Yeah. We did get a third question, but it was about 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and we're just not there yet. So we're not ignoring your question. We got your question. We will answer your question in a couple weeks. I just didn't want to jump the gun on it, and then we'll kind of embrace it as we get to that point. So I just want to say that. We didn't say that at the beginning, but I want to make sure that comes up.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, I think that's really good. Like you said, like exercising all of those spiritual muscles, and also just reframing it as they are all spiritual muscles, and not just relational, not just the knowledge piece. I have a prayer in my one of my war rooms that just says, like, God, help me remember to put my hands on my life, and that my life is not an interruption from like what it is that I'm learning from you. Yeah. Because I can get caught in that a lot, too often.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Do you have anything that you wanted to share from your sermon that you didn't get to, or?
No, I don't think. What's interesting about that, I was looking at that. And this happens so many times when you're preparing like a message. At times there is a ton in 1 Thessalonians 2 we didn't even get to. Yeah. Like there are verses that I feel like we read together that we didn't dive into, and you just can't. This is still a little bit of a 1,000-foot view of Thessalonians. And, if we sat down and really just dug through all of this, it'd be a year-long series to go through these 2 chapters, which would be great. But, man, we love not having everything answered because we want questions like this. So, just a reminder, if we're talking through a passage on a Sunday and you're like, hey, it said this, and we didn't really address that. Right. We're not avoiding it because it's a hard topic, but we're also just not trying to have 4-hour sermons to cover everything for you as well. We're kind of just picking and choosing as we move through on some of this, but we would love to answer those questions on this kind of podcast. And then the only other thing from me is, if you want a disciple-making friendship, once again, man, we would encourage you guys to check out some groups. Yes. Whether it's this women's group that's starting this week. Yep. Of God's Unbreakable Promises that are out there. Yeah, jump on in about that.
Okay, so we had our event Friday. It was really exciting, really fun. If you guys came, thank you.
No guys actually came.
So gals, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
It was super fun. And also, it's not just about the event. It really is about the disciple making friendships. And what you called it, relational ministry?
Relational evangelism. Yeah, relational ministry.
Relational evangelism. I like that a lot. Well, it's about that. And so I hope you join the groups. We really want you in the groups. But also, like, your example of your mentor taking you to coffee. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated. And so if you're like, I can't do the group, it's just not in my schedule, it's not going to work. I hear you. I understand that. I hope you'll come eventually. But also, don't let that stop you.
Yeah.
because there are already people in your life. My husband and I own a business, and the whole sermon, all I could think about is just this one guy that has worked for us for a year. And I realized when I talked to him this week, I don't even know his kids' names.
Mm-hmm.
I know he has kids.
Mm-hmm.
I know all about his kids.
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing not knowing his kids' names? Like, it's so simple sometimes.
Sure.
Whoops. Anyway, it's just stuff like that. And there are people out there. And so just like you said in your sermon, slow down. Let the busyness slow down and figure those things out. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
But also, if you are a lady and you want to go to those groups, please join us, because it's going to be great.
Yeah, it'll be cool. We'll have a lot of groups specifically for women, groups specifically for men,
Yep.
but then also fun groups like our apologetics that we'll do, and different studies or skills or things like that will pop up. And, takes different groups to meet different people and different needs at times. So we encourage, if one sounds intriguing, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Give it a shot.
Well, thanks.
There you go.
I'm excited for the rest of the sermon series, and thanks for this. And I don't know what else to say. 'Cause
Yeah, it should be good. Yeah, like, share, comment, all that good stuff on social media. And we will see you guys again this coming Sunday morning.